Hi there, musitrature recaps in the house. Today, we're explaining a mind-bending mystery and thriller movie called Killer Weekend. Our lead character is the gorgeous Kimberly, a young woman who's living the high life, all thanks to her skillful use of dating apps. She's got the art of being a sugar baby down pat, understanding that even a simple selfie can make or break her game. Meeting up with a fellow accomplice in the quest for wealthy companions, Kimberly knows her worth is determined by how much the most frugal guy is willing to shell out. When she catches wind of the new app Daddies and Butterflies, she jumps on board, eager to reel in fresh prospects willing to pay for her time. And guess what? Ted's on the same page, embracing the technological revolution in the dating world. No more sneaking his dad's adult magazines, the internet has it all. As evening sets in, Kimberly meets up with an older lover, dropping hints about a shiny new iPhone she'd love to receive before their next rendezvous. Meanwhile, Ted's on a date too, ready to open up his wallet to help out a girl in financial straits. Both know what they're getting into at that cafe, eagerly anticipating what comes next. Back at her place, Kimberly revels in her latest acquisition, that brand new iPhone. Tired of her wealthy suitor, she's plotting his exit. But first, she needs to keep up appearances and show her gratitude for the lavish gift. Over in Ted's world, he and his girlfriend Lisa head out for a cozy overnight picnic. Ted wanders off at one point, leaving Lisa to rummage through the trunk for another bottle of wine. What she finds sends shivers down her spine, a knife and gloves. In a desperate bid for survival, Lisa fights back with the knife, but Ted's brute strength prevails, sealing her fate. Our main gal, Kimberly, has a cunning way of living large, by scoring wealthy dudes on dating apps. Her latest squeeze, Paul, gets a special treatment that's, well, quite final. Post some intimate moments with Paul, Kimberly heads to the kitchen for a couple of glasses. Now, here's where things get wild. She whips out inorganic mercury from batteries, stirs it into the wine, and serves it up to Paul. You guessed it, he's soon in the afterlife. Oh, and speaking of her hustle, Kimberly stumbled upon an insurance loophole for folks not exactly tied to her legally. So, she's making a killing, literally. Rich men beware, Kimberly woos them, takes their goodies, then serves up a deadly concoction. If she wasn't busy with this gig, she'd make a great chemist, but science doesn't pay the bills like this does. After saying goodbye to Paul, she heads home, ready for her next scheme. Now, on to her encounter with Ted. They meet on a dating site and hit it off. Likes are exchanged, and things seem promising. Later, hanging with her pal Annie, Kimberly embarks on a shopping spree. She educates Annie on her techniques to milk men for all they're worth. But Annie's not thrilled with this strategy. She's all about a different kind of game. Kimberly takes it upon herself to demonstrate the power of her money-making magic. She chats up a saleswoman, and guess what? Turns out, her income is peanuts compared to Kimberly's savvy. A little later, our leading lady ventures on a date with Ted. Mid-convo, she ducks out to answer a call. Plot twist, it's a detective telling her that Paul is out for good, and they've got some talking to do. Meanwhile, Ted's got his own thing going on. A flirtatious waitress catches his eye, but he's got Kimberly on his arm for the moment. Kimberly returns, not exactly dazzling with her intellect, but hey, who needs brains when you've got looks, right? Bright and early, Kimberly meets up with a detective for a chit-chat, all part of the process. The cop pulls out a note left behind by Paul, her ex-flame. Turns out, it's a farewell letter where he pours out his feelings and takes responsibility for his own demise. A somber start, indeed. Later, as the day unfolds, Kimberly sits down with a therapist, Dr. Harris, to navigate the path to normalcy. The doctor wonders if she's taking her prescribed sedative, but our gal read some not-so-great stuff online about its side effects. Dr. Harris recommends less internet surfing and suggests she stick to the medication. In their session, Kimberly opens up about her rocky relationship with her stepfather, who treated her poorly while her mother turned a blind eye. And hey, guess what? To boost her finances, Kimberly's got a financial assistant in the mix. They share profits, and she keeps him happy in more ways than one. Now, enter Fred, a financial whiz and insurance salesman. He's got a knack for getting insurance policies from clients Kimberly wants out of the picture, making them some pretty pennies. After business talk, Fred tries to turn their dynamic into something more, but Kimberly shuts it down cold. This ain't a love story, it's just business. Of course, Fred feels a twinge of jealousy, especially when he hears about Ted's, bedroom skills. But he's more curious about how Kimberly convinced Paul to pen that suicide note. Turns out, Kimberly proposed an idea: they'd write letters to each other in case they met in the afterlife. Paul, wanting to keep the peace, went along with it, avoiding a spat with Kimberly. In the evening, Kimberly and Ted meet up and decide to have a picnic in the woods. While they're there, Ted goes to his car to open the trunk, where he has gloves and a knife stored. Just then, a park ranger unexpectedly shows up, ruining Ted's plans. The ranger mentions that a recent crime had occurred in the area, they found a girl's body, and advises them to be more cautious. This terrifies Kimberly, and she asks Ted to take her back home. Ted becomes furious that he wasn't able to harm the girl. He drives around the area, looking for a new potential victim, and comes across a girl named Nancy who's alone. Nancy dreams of becoming a famous actress, and Ted lies, claiming to be a producer who can help her achieve her dream. The next morning, a detective discovers Nancy's body on the same lawn where Lisa's body was found a week earlier. This prompts the detective to realize that a serial killer is now operating in the city. Meanwhile, Kimberly finds out that her neighbor, who lives on the next street, has passed away, which greatly frightens her. Later, she meets with Fred, who once again brings up the question of whether he's better than Ted. Kimberly's honest response deeply hurts Fred, as she prefers the company of a more experienced lover like Ted. Kimberly calls Ted to share the news about Nancy. Ted comprehends that he must regain control and be more cautious when selecting victims. That evening, the couple reunites at Ted's house and enjoys their time together. Ted admits that he used to enjoy drinking but had to quit due to liver issues. He hints at his new hobby, which Kimberly assumes involves dating young girls, unaware of Ted's sinister intentions. In the morning, Kimberly prepares breakfast and secretly adds poisonous mushrooms to Ted's portion. Later that evening, Ted falls ill and urgently calls for an ambulance. At her next session with a psychotherapist, Kimberly talks about encountering a seemingly good man. The doctor suggests that she should consider pursuing a relationship, but Kimberly is convinced it's too late for that. Not long after, she meets up with Fred and reveals that Ted survived the poisoning, making it more challenging to get rid of him than she initially thought. Fred expresses doubt and suspects that Kimberly might have developed feelings for her intended victim. Kimberly denies this, emphasizing that her interactions with men are purely transactional. She remains determined to take decisive action and bring this matter to an end. Fred warns that 2 consecutive poisoning attempts would raise suspicions, and he proposes they come up with an alternative method to eliminate Ted. In the evening, the couple meets at a cafe to discuss plans for the upcoming weekend. Ted suggests they go out of town, mentioning that his friend has a charming house where they can spend a couple of days. Kimberly also shares details about her therapy sessions, where the therapist suggested she should consider starting a relationship. Both Kimberly and Ted are reluctant about this idea, as Ted's hobby consumes most of his free time. Curious about Ted's activities, Kimberly expresses interest, and Ted promises to show her what he enjoys doing the most. Following their date, Kimberly confers with Fred to discuss their plan for eliminating Ted. Fred proposes staging an assault with a robbery, during which he will shoot Ted a couple of times. He has already pinpointed a discreet cafe on the way out of town to carry out the plan. The following evening, the couple heads to a countryside retreat. Kimberly, feeling uneasy about Fred's plan, contacts him to cancel their arrangements. This action frustrates Fred, who is upset because he is infatuated with Kimberly and is envious of her mature and experienced partner, Ted. While on the way, Kimberly shares her past with Ted. She opens up about growing up in poverty and her determination to do whatever it takes to support herself. Her mother used to sell food stamps and squander money on alcohol, which motivated Kimberly to strive for a better life. The next morning, the couple goes to a nearby cafe for breakfast. Ted inquires with the waitress about the location of his hardware store and briefly leaves Kimberly alone. During this moment, Fred finds Kimberly and confesses his romantic feelings to her. He offers his assistance to eliminate Ted. Despite his persistence, Kimberly turns down his proposal once again. Fred's jealousy becomes apparent, and he creates a scene, confessing his emotions. Kimberly requests that he leave her alone, emphasizing her commitment to the business and her reluctance to lose a dependable partner. Kimberly understands that the business takes precedence over emotions and assures that she won't falter at a critical juncture. Meanwhile, Ted locates a hardware store and fabricates a story about needing tools to rescue a trapped deer and clear blocked pipes. He purchases a saw, an axe, and hydrochloric acid, although he intends to use them for a different purpose. Once Fred departs, Kimberly contacts a psychotherapist to discuss her feelings and experiences. The doctor comes to the realization that Kimberly has developed romantic feelings for Ted. Later on, the couple goes on a picnic, during which Kimberly disrupts Ted's plans and confesses her love for him. On their way back home, they briefly separate, and Ted notices Fred. Recognizing him from a previous encounter, Ted becomes suspicious of Kimberly's intentions. When they meet up again, Fred proposes a scheme involving gas burners and a staged accident. Kimberly is concerned that Ted might catch on early, and Fred offers to personally handle the situation if needed. Despite Fred's suggestions, Kimberly declines his help and asks to be left alone. Upon returning home, she adds a new poison to Ted's juice and then goes to sleep. During the night, Fred tries to call Kimberly, but her phone is on silent mode, causing her to miss the call. However, Ted hears it and becomes suspicious of Kimberly's actions. The next morning, Kimberly wakes up to find herself tied to the bed by Ted. Fearing for her life, she admits that Fred had planned to eliminate Ted, but she had fallen in love and rejected the idea. Kimberly also reveals her strategy of using a dating app to target wealthy men and extract their money by ending their lives. In a shocking twist, Ted confesses that he's the one who disposes of vulnerable women. This is the night when Nancy passed away, and Kimberly was meant to be the victim instead, but their plans were thwarted by a ranger. Realizing they are both deeply involved in criminal activities, Kimberly proposes a partnership. She will find the targets, and Ted will eliminate them. Just as they discuss this, Fred calls, prompting the couple to decide to start with him. Ted agrees to Kimberly's plan and ends Fred's life. However, he decides to spare Kimberly due to her confession of falling in love with him. And thus, the movie concludes. Thank you for watching.